All right, so welcome to the fourth episode of Let's Corona. There was unfortunately a lot of troubles with the sound yesterday, and I had to cancel. So Eham Ahmad, the Syrian pianist from Yarmouk, he has been postponed, and he's gonna join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the evening. Today, I have a special guest. It's somebody that I've known for the past 10 years. We've been working together on a lot of different projects. I think I met her the first time we did a masterclass at the Danish Design School. She's a social anthropologist It's Karen Lisa Salamon, and she's joining from Copenhagen. And she has some very interesting views and insight on society of today, and especially in relation to what's happening right now with COVID-19, basically taking over all of the world. And I'm gonna switch camera here so we can say hi to Karen Lisa. Hi Karen Lisa, welcome to this episode of Let's Corona. Nice to have
Hello.
you. Hi. So can you tell us a little about, as an anthropologist, how do you see this COVID-19 affecting the world, the humans and society of today?
Oh, it affects us in a lot of ways. You could say that the overall change is just to something more intense in every respect. So we have already a globalized society, but the globality becomes more acute when we see how the virus moves. We already have a lot of political destabilization, but the lack of political leadership or the problems of political leadership become more clear during this kind of crisis. So a lot of the tendencies that we already have become kind of enlarged when we have a crisis like this one.
And one thing is society and at a governmental level, but in terms of the family life and the people around us, how do you see this is affected by the coronavirus?
Also, there are a lot of themes in that, but one interesting theme, I think, is one of responsibility and related to risk. So viewers, some of you will know that as a family, we are responsible for each other. And some of you will know that as an individual, we are not responsible for each other. A lot of it depends on where you live, where you come from. So I live in Denmark, which is a very individualized society where we have a very strong ideology of individual responsibility and individual freedom. And when this meets a virus which is collectively contagious, this creates some interesting conflicts. So people who are used to do what they think is right for themselves suddenly have to feel responsible for a lot of other people that they might infect or from whom they might get infection and carry it on to others. And also, if they live in a family, this family becomes much more clear as a group of responsibility. But if you live in an already very family-oriented culture, this may not be so different, but then again, you will wonder about who carries responsibilities for whom and how this can be contained.
And in terms of you're talking about the coherence in between people and how we see and look at each other. What effect do you think it has as at the global community and how we interact as global citizens? Do we see each other closer or at a further distance, or does it have
Again,
several
I think
sides?
I think it kind of blows up the things, enlarges the tendencies we already have. So some people said when the COVID-19 started influencing Europe very strongly, and the aeroplane companies started to have less flights, and the borders, the national borders were reinforced, then people said, oh, but now we can talk about globalization in the past tense. I heard some people who talked about globalization as if it's no longer there, as if it's something we used to have, and now we are back to a very nationally protective situation. You could see it like that, but you can also say the fact that we saw something which apparently started in a province in China move everywhere on the globe within 6 months shows us that we are very global, and that the virus doesn't respect any borders, even when they're closed. So I think the way it affects us all is that we see our globality in many different ways. And therefore, it also becomes even more acute that when you see some people suffering, because we can do that now with these media we have here now, we can see each other across a lot of distance, then we can suddenly see how some people maybe suffer now and I can't help them. Or I can see some people who behave in a very risky way, and this can affect other people where they live. And I know that now because maybe I'm in another place on the timeline of the virus. So here in where I live, we've had the virus actively for about 4 weeks. But in some places, maybe they've only had it for 1 or 2 weeks. And so I can see that when I see images of people still crowding in places, or still, apparently living their normal lives. And then I think, wow, they don't realize that in 2 weeks or in 1 week, they will all be very sick and some of them will die because they're somewhere else on the timeline. And I feel I can see that like as if I was standing, on a mountain and looking down and seeing what's happening down there. But I can't call them. I can't tell them anything. I just see this, and this is very intense, but also makes us realize we are all in the same world, but we are in different situations in this world.
So what you're saying is basically like watching a movie. You know what's gonna happen right in the next moment, but you can't do anything. Just to watch and see it happen. It's just gonna run, and you can't do anything about it except for watch.
Yeah. And another thing is that people are very critical of moralizing. So the thing we maybe could do would be to say, oh, no, look, be careful, don't do this, don't do that. But again, there is this tendency that people say, don't tell us what to do. We can think for ourselves. We can judge what is right and not. And I think the virus shows that no one here really has the full picture. So no one can totally judge what is right and wrong. There is so much insecurity because we don't have full information yet. Or maybe we'll never have it about what's happening.
Sure. And in terms of, I know you as an anthropologist, you're looking at the past times as well, which is quite interesting in relation to what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future. And you have this idea of looking at Mickey Mouse with the white gloves. Can you spare some thoughts about Mickey Mouse?
Yeah, well, I didn't start with looking at Mickey Mouse, but I started thinking about other examples of epidemic situations that we have had that have moved around, and also pandemic situations that happened in the past. And we have also a lot of epidemic situations happening in some places on the earth, but not moving very much, fortunately, like the Zika virus or the Zika infection. But we can look at how other times and places have related with infectious diseases, and then we can see how that influenced their lives at the time, and maybe we can learn from this. So one area that interests me as a social scientist is how we look at contagiousness, infection, the idea that you have one person and this person meets another person, and then the other person somehow gets some of the, dust or the dirt or even the social status of this person onto their body. And in anthropology, we talk about contagious situations also in a broader sense, not only as a virus, not only bacteria, but also you can also be in bad company. If you hang out with people that you shouldn't hang out with, some people will think, oh, he was infected by their bad ways and he became like them. So in anthropology, we work also with the symbolic ways in which you can become infected, and we look at how the concrete virus and the concrete bacteria influence our symbolic thinking about our lives.
And this is something you
And so
then
you can
can
look at
see.
Mickey
Yeah.
Mouse, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. So when
So
you look at
Mickey
Mickey
Mouse
Mouse.
so Mickey Mouse, he's wearing gloves, and they're white, and most of the Disney characters are wearing these white gloves. Donald Duck is wearing white gloves as well, but only the nice characters are wearing the gloves all the time. Some of the not so nice characters are not always wearing gloves, especially in some of the older cartoons. And when were these created? They were created the years before and right after the Second World War. And at that time, there was tuberculosis very strongly in also in the modern industrialized world. And there was only then penicillin started to be known. It was a lot of people could not be treated for this. And it's also a contagious disease with bacteria that you shouldn't move to the next person. We also had polio, when people get lame in a leg or an arm. And this is also a viral disease. And so Mickey Mouse, who is a nice guy, he's an entertainer. He does the right thing at his time. He would wear white gloves. And he was not the only one, because the fashion, if you look at the fashion of what was really elegant at the same time when we had these infectious diseases that could not all of them be treated very well, you can see that the ladies, some very famous movie actresses also, the fashion icons, are wearing gloves as well. So this is just an example. We can see how something that is about how viruses or bacteria or even good and bad company can be, rub on us,
Yeah.
becomes a fashion ideal. So this is one thing. Then another thing that you can see is how the ideals of how we should look, what is an ideal look, is also influenced by illnesses. So in the 19th century, in the 1800s, it is assessed that probably out of the people who died in Europe in the mid 1800s, a quarter of them died from tuberculosis. And as it's probably the case that only half the people who get the illness die from it, so maybe even something like half of the population of Europe may have been infected with this illness. And this illness results in people having a lot of fever, low fever, so they get red cheeks, red lips, they look pale, and they get this shiny eyes. Sometimes the eyes look bigger and they lose weight. And this is the ideals of the paintings of the period. And you can see how this heroic, the person who is heroically ill, in much of the art and the poetry of the time, is actually somebody who probably has the tuberculosis, which they didn't really know what it was yet. They knew it was an illness, but they didn't know how it was transmitted.
And this can
and they had
actually
a
be
lot of
seen.
ideas of that. So Mickey Mouse's gloves and the ideals of fashion and the way we look at people and how we paint them and how we present them in television or in films, this will also be influenced from big epidemic situations. So these are
And
just everyday examples of that.
as a wizard looking into the future, what would you say that what do you have any presumptions on how this is going to affect the future? Now looking at the past and trying to point towards the future, what do you think that COVID-19 will actually affect? How will it affect us in the future as human beings on a global scale in the world?
That depends that depends a lot on how the politicians and the large organizations, economically important organizations, behave. Because we risk now coming into a huge economic crisis. And I'm not an economist, I'm a social scientist, but we can look at how after large upheavals like natural catastrophes or wars, if there is a lot of aid coming in and it's given in the right way and people's lives are reestablished, then you can get over the situation and learn from it. And some of the large inoculation programs, vaccine programs we have in the world were developed because of the polio situation 60, 70 years ago. And that shows that if you deal with it, you can move forward. But if you don't deal with it, we will have a situation with many more people who lose their work and livelihoods and new forms of refugees. So it's so important and interesting how the large companies, how the large organizations and politicians will deal with this.
Actually, when Denmark was closed down, one of the first things, because I'm very aware of the language used, and we had this term that everybody was saying, we've never been here before. And the first thing I did was to go back and read about the Spanish flu in 1918. And I was struck by the similarities of actually when COVID-19 hit the world, how it's running now. And I actually fear, if you look at the history, back then in August, they said that now it's over, everything is fine, people started going out. And then in September, October, it came back with full speed and it was killing even more people around because it had mutated and was even stronger at that point.
Yes. So the difference between 1918 and the Spanish flu and the COVID-19 today, there were several differences, but one is that today we believe that we can get within months or maybe a year a vaccine that will work. This is because we today believe in science. We believe we have experienced that both the economic forces, the market forces, and the political forces want science to create these vaccines, and we have the knowledge today that it's probable and likely. And so we all have to trust science and may trust science in a way that people couldn't really do in 1918. In 1918, they didn't have penicillin yet. They didn't have the antibiotics that we now have experienced. But other than that, I think you're right in saying that I'm not an epidemiologist, but as far as I understand what the epidemiologists say, there can be mutations, but there can also be different strains, and they can the illness can return like we know now with the common flu. It comes every year in a new brand, and people have to get vaccines every year if they're old or frail. So
and for that, I can also add that in history, the Spanish flu was running for almost 2 years along since the outbreak. And so, but to before we finish up, to finish in a positive way, because of this catastrophic thing which is going on right now, which obviously is affecting all of us. But let's try to look at if there is any, in your opinion, positive things in all of this chaotic situation around the world.
Yes, I think so. But of course, not for the people who get sick and die, But for some of those who don't, you can say there is a new spirit of innovation, of how we can be better at helping each other and develop new ways of helping each other. People are forced to think in terms of the technologies like the one we are using now to make this talk happen. So there will be a lot of innovation. Again, to look at it positively, I also think there is a solidarity with a lot of people. A lot of people are thinking of how they can take responsibility for each other. And some people who normally like taking risks, who find it exciting to dare do things that maybe are not the safest, they now think maybe I can do it because I'm strong, but maybe I shouldn't do it because I can then go out and bring this sickness to somebody who's not so strong. So I think it does introduce, in the best cases, a new social responsibility, but it also sometimes does not. And so we have to ask ourselves to be innovative. How can we help people to understand the responsibility we all have to take? How can we help people do that without just forcing them too much or moralizing too much? But we are used to be able to plan most things today, and this is a catastrophe which isn't plannable. We're also used to control most things, and this is a catastrophe which isn't controllable. But there are certain things we can do, and we also have to trust in science, because there is a lot of conspirational theories happening out there. People thinking that the illness came from all kinds of places, or that there are evil forces behind it.
Sure.
And the scientists have traced the composition of the virus. They say that this is not made by human beings. It doesn't have any of the characteristics that normally is associated with viruses created in a lab. It seems to really be created in nature. And we need to trust each other. We need to help each other and not create these evil stories about who maybe is behind it. We have to look ahead and think, rather than thinking who is guilty of this and so on, thinking how can we solve this? And science is really important.
It can bring us together at many levels. I think with
Yes.
that said, it's thanks for a very nice talk. If you just say, I will finish up this call and I'll get back to you in a second. So this was the 4th episode. Thanks a lot for being with us, Karen Lisa. It was very interesting. I hope you get something out of it out there as well. And I do believe this is a time which is very good for reflection and thinking about how we're using our time and our lives. And me personally, I've been using a lot of time with the kids in the nature, walking. And I had a talk yesterday with my boys when we were walking, because in Denmark we are doing our homeschools. And we talked about how difficult it was to be away from your friends and being in isolation and not being able to just go out and enjoy the time together. And also had a talk about, because I've been dealing a lot with the war zones and people coming from war, and I think there's a great parallel to this, because I think we humans now understand how difficult it actually is to be able to maintain a normal life that we're used to, and how quick we also adapt to the new situations. And I think this is worth for us, at least not coming from a war zone but a corona zone, thinking about those living in these difficult situations, because this is very much alike. And I think also Karen Lisa had a lot of nice and important messages about how we are connected, and it's important to help each other and look at how we can evolve in a positive way for the future of our common home, this globe that we're living in. So with that said, thank you for all being here today. Please do let me know if you have any improvements. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm doing it now, but I don't know. I don't have a clue if you think it's interesting or if you have ideas or anything. Just throw them back to me, and I will take notice of it and maybe alter it so we can improve. Tomorrow, I will have the amazing Ihamamat from Yarmouk. He's playing on his piano. He's won a lot of prizes playing concerts all around the world. His story is that he was during the war in Syria for years. He took his piano to the streets in Yarmouk. He was playing until radical groups entered the area, and he was actually forced to flee Syria. And now he's living in Germany in asylum with his family, luckily. And he's just such a big talent when he's playing the piano, and he has a lot of offer and give to all of us. And tomorrow's talk is with him. So thanks for joining. Like, subscribe, and whatever these YouTubers are saying. And stay tuned.